Well, we got Caleb. We got a big win by Tennessee as the Vols are able to not only beat Clemson in the Orange Bowl, but dominate them thoroughly in a game that was probably only in question for a minute or two, I would say midway through the fourth quarter when Clemson was able to pull it to within a touchdown. But in the end, Tennessee wins 31-14. And guys, let me just start as we got the Caleb's with us. Caleb Giroux, who does a great job of covering recruiting for us, and Caleb Calhoun, who he'll have his story up, but probably already up, as a matter of fact, on offthehooksports.com. You can check out my column about Joe Milton and also just the undeniable psyche of this team throughout the season. So go ahead and click that thumbs up button. We greatly appreciate it. Tennessee wins 11 games for only the 8th time in team history. So, Caleb Calhoun, let me start with you. What did you think of the performance? I'll be honest, headed into this game, I didn't know which direction it would go. I could see it going a number of directions, but Tennessee really set the tone early and played very, very well.
Yeah, bowl games you never know how they're going to work out because you don't know what teams feel when they come in. Dave, you and I talked about this last week. It's very memorable. The last time Tennessee played Clemson was in the Peach Bowl in 2003, and that was the last time they were 10-2 at the end of the regular season. They lost that game because everybody knew they were upset about not being in a BCS Bowl in that game, and Clemson was a far inferior team. You have to give Tennessee credit for how they played tonight. I think the standout, I think the story is Joe Milton. I'm going to be honest. We got to be fair to him. No one saw that accuracy coming tonight. I mean, he wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong, by any stretch of the imagination, but he hit Ramel Keaton for a wide open touchdown. I mean, yeah, Keaton was wide open, but that's a touchdown pass that Joe Milton never throws last year or even like 2 weeks ago. Then there were the two other touchdown passes to Brew McCoy and Squirrel White. He hit them on beautiful dimes over the middle. He was great over the middle. I would actually go as far to say he was better over the middle than Hendon Hooker had been all year long. And that's saying something.
I've got some thoughts on that. Let me go to Jaro and kind of an overarching your thoughts of the game and what Tennessee was able to accomplish tonight in the big win.
Yeah, I would say the same thing about Joe Milton. He really impressed tonight. My only gripe with him is that every once in a while he'd hold the ball too long. And even with an O-line that give him a lot of time, it looked like he was just looking to run and would end up taking a 2 or 3 yard sack because he couldn't get out of the pocket. But really the defense kind of stood out today. I don't know if you want to say, maybe Clemson's offense just didn't play good, but giving up 14 points to the number 7 team in the nation is always a plus in a bowl game for sure.
Please hit that thumbs up button. We appreciate that. I want to share my thoughts. We're getting a little bit of feedback, I think, from Calhoun. I'm going to bring you right back, Caleb. Hang with me. But I want to share my thoughts on Joe Milton. I think that, yes, he was better. I still think there were a lot of errant downfield passes, but I thought a lot of what Joe Milton did was dictated by coverage. I thought Clemson came out and said, you're absolutely not going to be this deep. They played a lot of soft zone coverage. And I think the days of questioning Joe Milton's accuracy in the short and intermediate level are officially over. I think the days of continuing to wonder about his deep ball accuracy are still very valid. So, Caleb, that's where you and I may see it a little bit different. I didn't really have any question about him being able to throw it over the middle, being able to complete some short passes. My question was, in this offense, you have to complete the ball downfield. He wasn't asked to do that a lot. He didn't miss a couple of those. So I still had that question mark in my mind. But as a whole, it's a win for Joe Milton. It's a win for the Vols and an optimistic ending to a historic season because of the way Joe Milton played. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, I would say the one area where I might break from you is that I didn't see. Yeah, I saw some errant downfield passes, but I didn't see any more errant downfield passes than I saw from Hendon Hooker throughout the year.
That's fair.
And so I think look, if you're 50-50 on those passes in this offense, that's exactly kind of what you want to be. And I mean, he did hit Squirrel White for, by the way, not to brag, I called Squirrel White being a star in this game. I said slot receiver position is interchangeable. Jalen Hyatt was a product of the system, and that's going to be proven in the future. And Squirrel White balled out today, but Joe Milton hit him on a beautiful deep ball. He hit Ramel Keaton on a beautiful deep ball. And so we saw that he can do that. He's going to miss a couple of times, and that's going to happen in a game, but I didn't see him missing any more than Hendon Hooker usually misses. And so I have to give him credit for that.
I agree. I think where you and I might differ a little bit is I think there would have been twice the amount of throws downfield, especially in the first half, had Clemson not played so soft and played back. And then does he hit? I mean, if he hits 30% of those, that's probably you're winning a football game because we're talking about big gains, much less 50%. So I don't think other teams are going to play them like that. I thought Clemson kind of came in. I'm not at all trying to rain on Tennessee's parade here, but I kind of felt like, and it was mentioned by the announcers, Caleb Jarreau, it was mentioned several times that this would not define Cade Klubnik's career, which means the coaches told them that. They said that publicly. They played soft. It almost felt like they didn't want to get blown out. It just felt like two totally different approaches when you're watching that team. That one team felt like they had something to play for, and the other team just wanted to make sure it didn't get embarrassing, but it kind of did anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah, going into halftime, I remember I texted one of my friends. It was like, I don't know if Tennessee's winning this game or if Clemson is losing the game. Because it felt like they're playing bend but don't break, but they give up 8-yard catches every down, so they end up breaking anyway. Their kicker missed 3 field goals. He would just line up and kick it straight, which was kind of insane. And then Klubnik, I mean, he had some good throws and like the potential's there, but their whole offense is true freshmen. So I'm sure they went in with the game thinking, hey, we have nothing to lose. You know, our running back's a sophomore, top 2 wide receivers are freshmen. We're starting a true freshman. So I could see that too, and it felt like it was conservative for sure. And whenever you're playing Tennessee, you can't really settle for field goals with that offense because you don't know when you're going to get stops.
You and I talked during the game, and you thought Klubnik was really bad. Calhoun, what were your thoughts? I thought he looked like a guy who hadn't played a lot, frankly. I thought there were some skills there. It's kind of like a preseason football game to me. I don't know what he's going to be in a year from now. I really have no more idea other than his skill set. And I watched highlights of him throughout the week. I really have no more idea whether or not he'll be a national championship winning quarterback or another DJ and end up getting benched or a Kelly Bryant. I haven't seen it enough to determine. You?
Yeah, I wrote about this actually in the
Right.
Rapid Reactions, which is on Off the Hook Sports, guys. Check that out in Prime. It's up now. Klubnik was awful today. Let's just call it what it is. He was horrible today. And what you really saw was you saw a guy who, when he came in the North Carolina game, nobody had really prepared for him. And we know this all the time. Young, the backup quarterback is the most popular person on any team that's struggling a little bit. And then they come in and no one's prepared for him, and then they ball out. And then Tennessee had a month to prepare for Klubnik. And now part of this is a credit to Tennessee's pass rush. I will say Tennessee's pass rush, Byron Young and Aaron Beasley got to Klubnik a lot tonight. And I don't think anybody saw it. I actually didn't think that would happen, honestly. But
Well,
at the same time,
I can guarantee you there was a tell on the Beasley A-gap blitz. They saw something on tape. I don't know if it was what the center was doing or the way the guard was aligned, but there was a tell. You don't come that bare 3 times. They found something on tape. And if you want to make a quarterback uncomfortable, rush him in the A-gap right up the middle. I think it'll be interesting in the next couple of days maybe to find out what that is. They knew something. He had a great game. Again, I'm not taking anything away from him, but I think they figured out something. Go ahead, continue.
Well, and even if you don't know, sorry, I want to jump in. Even if you don't know anything, like blitz the true freshman quarterback, see what he does under pressure. Because when he played North Carolina, he just kind of sat back there, and I mean anybody can sit back there and throw to wide receivers. So send some guys at him, hit him a couple times. I mean, his jersey was green at the end of the game, so they obviously did their job right.
Yeah, he looked pretty rough. Even my wife, who knows nothing about football, noticed that and said, "Look at his jersey. My goodness."
Exactly.
Calhoun, I thought Tennessee's defense in particular played with a bit of an edge. I thought the whole team played with an edge. And I think it's because they feel like Hendon Hooker's injury was part of the reason, and I believe this to be the case, that they weren't included in the college football playoff, kind of like the NCAA basketball tournament will do the same thing. If you get a player hurt right before, it'll affect your seeding. I think Tennessee, the Hooker thing was what pushed them over the edge of not making the college football playoff, and I think Tennessee's football team was angry about that. I think that was motivation for Vanderbilt. I think it was motivation against Clemson.
I'm going to kind of disagree with you on that. I'm going to be honest. The only reason I'm going to say that is that I think the college football playoff chose the path of least resistance, which is let's take the only 4 non-2-loss Power 5 teams and put them in there. And Hendon Hooker's injury had nothing to do with Tennessee losing to South Carolina. And they would have lost that game no matter what.
I'm not saying that it did. You and I are on the same page. I'm saying they used that as motivation.
Oh, they might have. I agree. I think they came in with a little more to play for. I think they benefited from – we talked about bowl games last week. And, we talked about how that is the one area – because the most overused term in sports is they wanted it more. But bowl games is there are teams that wanted it more. And I think Tennessee wanted this one more, and that was probably motivation. And also, they just benefited from – I don't think Clemson really cared to be there. I mean, I think we were watching them in this game, and I don't really think Clemson had any desire to play in this bowl game. I thought they were just going through the motions.
Yeah, I tried to do a little bit of digging throughout the week, and I never got an answer to this. But I wonder if there was somewhat of a split locker room between the two quarterbacks, DJ and Klubnik. I wonder if that played out throughout the season. I wonder if the players were more along the lines of DJ, because there has to be some reason why they didn't make the switch. Because as bad as Klubnik was tonight, DJ was pretty bad throughout the season. I think there's more behind the scenes there that might come out in the coming weeks. A couple other notes. Who would you guys have voted for? Travis letting us know that Milton the MVP. Who would you guys have voted for MVP? I would have probably voted Beasley, even though I think he got some good fortune off a tip that they found on tape, is my guess. But I would have probably gone with Beasley, but I'm fine with Milton.
What do you think, Jaru?
I don't know. I would probably go Milton or Squirrel White. Just because, I mean, Milton went 19 for 28, 251, and then Squirrel White had one of his touchdowns and 108 yards on 9 catches. So, and early in the game when Milton was kind of searching for to get the ball rolling, kind of get that confidence going, he was hitting Squirrel White almost every down. So I feel like if you don't get those easy catches to Squirrel White on the first drive or the second drive, that we probably aren't looking at the same game.
It's fair. Who would you have voted for?
I'm going to go Byron Young. I mean, you're right, Beasley, that was about the easy blitzes, but Byron Young, those were legitimate sacks and legitimate hurries, and that was about Byron Young and what he did. And I think that, I wrote about this in the Rapid Reactions. This was an anti-Heupel team in the sense, like, Dave, you talked about this. Because they were playing self-zone, Heupel he didn't take too many big shots in the first half. And it kind of slowed Tennessee's offense. And it really made the defense step up. And you're right, Aaron Beasley, that was just scheming and Tim Binks. But Byron Young really stepped in his final game with Tennessee. You wonder how a guy's going to play when he's going to the NFL. But he really wanted to make a statement in his last game. And you got to give him credit for that.
The fact that we're having a discussion amongst 5 players tells you how convincing Tennessee was tonight. That we're discussing 5 different legitimate candidates for MVP. Do me a favor, if you're tuned in, hit that thumbs up button. It allows us to reach out to more people, and we greatly appreciate that. CK tells us on our message board, for all the talk that Alabama ranked ahead of Tennessee, UT ended up with a better bowl situation, primetime standalone game versus top 10 team, while Bama has 11 a.m. start. Can you say karma? I said karma, and I know Caleb Calhoun proofread it a month ago. I said they're better off in the Orange Bowl than the Sugar Bowl. I thought that from the get. I thought it's a better trip. other than the Hard Rock Casino being just an absolute horrible casino, it's all in all a better trip. And I know that firsthand from a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, this was Friday night. It was also kind of the culmination, guys. I felt like of a bunch of bad bowls and guys getting mayonnaise dumped on them. No
I
offense.
was at that game. I saw it. It was
I know.
great.
I know. So, but a lot of these polls have very little meaning. This one was to name opponents, and yeah, you could say the same for the sugar. But I just thought nighttime, it was a great lead, and I think tomorrow I'll be interested to see the nationwide TV numbers because I think tomorrow that there'll be a lot of people that think I need to take care of my wife's to-do list, my to-do list, whatever the case may be, and then I'll start watching football at 4 o'clock. So I want to see numbers, primetime numbers versus tomorrow in the Sugar Bowl. But yeah, Caleb, I said it a month ago. I thought the Orange Bowl was a better trip, and the Tennessee fans should be happy. And you do have to credit Tennessee fans for this. For all the bowls that we saw, Calhoun, that had empty stands, Tennessee, once again, to no one's surprise, traveled and filled the Orange Bowl. I'm sure there were some Clemson people there. It was harder to tell because similar colors, but there were a lot of Tennessee fans, and my social media was very, very active, and that was impressive to see.
Yeah, and just for context, I want to let people know what they're doing with bowl games now because I went, as you said, I went to the Mayo Bowl today to watch Maryland and NC State. They did not sell tickets on the upper deck because they didn't want to see the fans be too dispersed. So they wanted to make sure that it looked a little more crowded, for lack of a better term. So there was nobody on the upper deck at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte today. And that's hilarious that's how they do that with bowl games now. And so when Clemson played Tennessee, I go back 20 years. I think this speaks to the hunger of the Tennessee fan base. Dave, this must have been a year before you said you started covering full time, I think, but in '99, Tennessee was so spoiled with success. Remember they played Nebraska in the Fiesta Bowl, and they didn't fill the stadium. Nebraska filled that stadium, and it was like 3/4 Nebraska fans. So 2 years later, when Tennessee clearly was the better team than Florida, Tennessee and Florida both had 2 losses. Tennessee beat Florida, had one more win. Florida got the BCS Bowl invite specifically because Tennessee did not fill the stadium in the Fiesta Bowl 2 years before. And then comes 2003, Florida gets the Outback Bowl invite over Tennessee, even though Florida's 8-4 and Tennessee's 10-2. And Tennessee couldn't fill the stadium in the Peach Bowl that year. And they lost to Clemson that year. And I think that there was a big appreciation for where they are as a program with Tennessee. I think Tennessee just they really appreciated being in this bowl game. And they understood what it meant. And you can tell Clemson is a little more where Tennessee was 20 years ago, where they're like, gosh, we're supposed to be in the college football playoff, and we're in a consolation New Year's Six bowl game, and the fans didn't show up. Tennessee fans did. The team didn't show up. Tennessee's team did. And we haven't even talked about the long-term implications of this for recruits because I said this before, Tennessee and Clemson cannot exist as powerhouses. The town's not big enough for the two of them to both be powerhouses. And this was a huge game in that regard.
No, I agree. It looked like gyro. It looked like one program trending up, one program trending down. Simple as that to me.
Well, the first thing I thought about when Calhoun was talking about it is Tennessee had this drought for so long where they weren't good. Butch Jones, Derek Dooley, all those coaches, and they haven't had success. It's almost kind of like re-energizes the fan base with their success. Like, this isn't guaranteed. You talk about like the prime days of Tennessee football, like early 2000s, late 90s. It felt like they were in the mix every year. So it was just expected they would get the best bowl games and that would come. And you almost see that with Clemson now with Dabo Swinney. Like, they're expected to be in the college football playoff. The ACC is not particularly strong, so you're supposed to win it every year. And now they're not showing up to these consolation bowl games. So I really do think you see Tennessee on the uptrend. And I wouldn't say Clemson's program is trending down, but they're super young, so you really can't say that. Like Klubnik, we don't know what he'll become. He might become Trevor Lawrence next year. Or he might become, DJ going to Oregon State. So I really don't know where Clemson's program stands after this game, but I feel like Tennessee is on the way up.
the reason I think they're trending down, and at one point I thought Alabama was trending down, and then they trended back up. I'm not saying it's a permanent direction, but I think they're trending down because you lose one of the best defensive coordinators, Brent Venables, to Oklahoma. I think that you haven't embraced NIL correctly. I mean, they could turn all this around, but just if you're a high school kid watching those two teams right there, I don't think there's any question which one you want to play for. And we're not even taking into account all the highlights that Tennessee's had throughout the season and the records broken and all that sort of thing. When you really sit back and think about it, Tennessee's won 11 games in a season 8 times. And I would take this team's psyche. No, I didn't cover. I think it was the 1955 team. I'm not that old. But I will say this. I would put their psyche up against anybody that they've played. Please, again, hit the thumbs up for us. It helps us share to more people on YouTube. Because this team shouldn't have won 11 games. They were predicted to win 7.5. And something I illustrated in the column on offthehooksports.com, they didn't quit when Alabama was driving for a potential game-winning field goal. They didn't quit after they lost to Georgia in somewhat embarrassing fashion. They didn't quit after South Carolina. They just didn't quit. And Caleb, those years, those things that happen, I think you were actually one of the first to say this. You don't know when you have a chance to grab those years. I think it was after the Alabama game. The makeup of this team mentally is going to change dramatically because it changes at every program every year. Josh Heupel will still be the head coach, but the Indians have to kind of fall in line with the chief. So you don't know what this team's going to be like. You could make an argument their roster is going to be better next year, but that's something this team had, not at the championship level like the 98 team, but that little something of not quit they had, and I think it'll be one of the most revered teams in Tennessee football history.
Yeah, I agree. I think you said 1955. I actually think it's 1965 that they most resemble. So for anybody that's interested in Tennessee football history, Doug Dickey came in 1964. And Dave, you know enough history to know Tennessee was a dormant. The single wing had died. They were way behind the times when Doug Dickey took over in 64, and he revolutionized the game. He revolutionized Tennessee football. 65 was the second year. They finished in the top 10 that year. Now, in 1966, they finished unranked, but still went to the bowl game. 1967, though, like the recruiting they were able to get from that 1965 year paid off in 1967. That was with Dewey Warren, the Swamp Rat. Anybody know Dewey Warren? and they went 9-2, won the SEC, and retroactively have declared themselves national champions for the 1967 year because they didn't count champions after bowl games during that time. So that second loss doesn't count.
Yeah, you know that history way better than me. I can tell you that you're absolutely right with the Nebraska Fiesta Bowl. I was at that game, and I was covering that game, and there were just a ton of Nebraska fans. I can tell you the 98. Now we're talking the season, so let me get my years right. The 97. So I'm sorry, the 2000 Fiesta Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, so 98 to 99 national championship. It was they went back to the Fiesta Bowl 99 to 2000. That was a ton of Nebraska fans. And then if you want to go back, one of the weirdest ones was the 97 to 98 because that was Peyton Manning's senior year. And I went to that game, just sat in the stands. And the funniest thing about that is you had a ton of Nebraska fans, but you had a ton of Florida State fans too, because they thought they were going to be at that game. And I remember sitting in a section that was almost all Florida State, and it was just bizarre. Tennessee Smokey says, what an accomplishment for Josh Heupel and his coaching staff on their efforts to put out the dumpster fire in Knoxville and turn the Tennessee football program around. Congratulations. We did have another post. I'm going to go through this, David. Have you had a chance to figure out who won the final score contest? I will check that tomorrow. He said he just got done driving. Apparently, a great game it was if you're a Tennessee fan. He is in Gallup, Mexico. So be safe and better off driving than taking a Southwest flight. Because you're never going to get there.
Well played. Well played.
Thank you. Someone has been following their stock recently to see when might be a good time to purchase, if ever. Hit the thumbs up button. We're going to hang with you a little bit longer and talk about Tennessee's big win. I have a question for you. So if somebody looks at this Clemson game and they say, okay, you had them manageable at 14 points at half, right? You had them manageable with this soft zone. Is that a way to defend Tennessee in the future and make Tennessee a team that has to complete a bunch of intermediate passes, that has to mini chunk their way down the field? Could you see that being a way that teams start to defend Tennessee in the future? Be interested to see how people adjust, because at some point, what TCU's running, which is somewhat similar, what Tennessee's running, and what they're trying to run somewhat similar in Oklahoma. I mean, they're going to find out a way to defend this. Could you see that being the evolution, Calhoun?
I mean, maybe, but it's not like Joe Milton. At that point, Tennessee, Josh Heupel will just find quarterbacks who can convert passes over the middle, because that's what Joe Milton did.
So you win 35-20 instead of 65-40. I don't know.
Yeah,
much better.
And Dave, I got to be honest. I think you're being a little bit unfair to Joe Milton on that, because yes, Clemson played a lot of soft zone. Joe Milton had 2 touchdown passes that were over the middle. That was in the red zone. Clemson wasn't playing soft zone at that point. They were Brew McCoy and Squirrel White were well covered on those plays, and that was just a nice pass by Joe Milton.
No. I have zero question about his intermediate accuracy. Zero. I thought those were great throws. I thought they didn't take as many chances downfield because of the way they were playing soft in the first half. I think if that's the way they get played by most of the teams they played this year, they're taking 6 or 7 shots downfield as opposed to 3 or 4.
Yeah, but if that happens, I mean, who cares if that's how they win? I mean, they control the game.
I agree. Gyro, defensively, Tennessee without Jeremy Banks, and when we talk about Aaron Beasley, I think we would all agree that Tennessee's defensive backfield could still use a bit of work. And I guess we'll see if the talent comes in. I know you'd written about a bunch of guys that are coming in. I don't know if you have anybody that is on the top of your head. This football team, in terms of roster, to compete on the championship level, I believe year in and year out, has to upgrade. They're not there yet, but they're getting closer.
I feel like a little bit of what we saw tonight was there was some coaching there, because a lot the defensive backs weren't getting burnt per se, because Klubnik was not throwing over their heads. He was underthrowing everything, but they would never turn around and look at the football. So anytime Klubnik would underthrow those receivers down the field, it was an instant defensive pass interference, because the DB wouldn't turn around. If the DB turns around and looks at the ball, it doesn't matter what contact is there, because he can just say he's playing the ball. But whenever they're running, with their hands up and then the receiver tries to cut back, it just doesn't work. So that was what stood out to me tonight the biggest on defense. I feel like the linebacker play was all right. They get some linebackers in the 23 class who can probably step in, some guys maybe in that star position. But the DBs, I just don't understand. I don't understand where the disconnect is, because they're either pass interfering intentionally, or they're not turning around to look at the football, or they're just completely not there. So I do think Klubnik bailed them out a little bit tonight. 54 passing attempts is not what I would have expected, and he still threw for 320 yards. But I don't understand where the disconnect is in the secondary.
Let me ask you this, because I think Calhoun and I see Joe Milton's performance a little bit differently. So let me ask you this from OddSpots. Calhoun, OddSpots said, I will say again, time to stop doubting Joe. He needs to improve his running. Stop thinking some Wake Forest quarterback would be elite in the SEC. They do need secondary help. So is it time to stop doubting Joe? Would you agree with that?
I mean, funny enough, even though I'm the bigger defender of Joe than you were in this, I would still say it's not time to stop totally doubting, because it was one game, and it was the Orange Bowl, and it was a game that we all agree it didn't look like Clemson really wanted to be there. And so I wouldn't fully say it's time to. I think here's what I say: the clock has been reset on Joe. There are certain things that you thought you could get away with in playing Joe Milton that you can't, and that's a credit to him. Um, like you pointed out, Dave, you can't play soft zone on him a lot of times because he'll pick you apart over the middle. Um, so I would say the clock has been reset, and that okay, you have to go back to the drawing board on how to stop him. That doesn't mean that he is unbeatable just yet. It reminds me of remember. Let's just go to the NFL for a minute. Remember when Tim Tebow threw for 316 yards against the Steelers in that playoff game, and that was considered. And everybody was talking about Tebow, and I think my big thing was Tebow. They played man coverage on him that whole game and were daring him to throw. And okay, he beat him, and they reset the clock, and they're like, okay, we're going to have to play solid defense on him beyond that now. And then the next week, the New England Patriots blew him out.
Here is why I have not stopped doubting Joe Oddspots, and I know you disagree with me. I think he cost Tennessee 2 sacks in this game because he's processing things slower. That could change in the offseason. Still doesn't have a lot of experience overall. So that could definitely change. And the other thing is I think you're going to have to – you're getting a little feedback from Calvin, so let me drop you down here. But the other thing I would say to that, Gyro, is you have to be able to complete the deep ball in this offense for it to be at its most effective. So those two things, I thought he cost them 2 sacks. I thought the deep ball, I've still got questions about it. I thought he missed 3 or 4 of those in the first half, and the one he hit to Ramel Keaton on the sideline was bare open. You could have thrown that pass. I couldn't because my shoulder's old. But so, yeah, do I still have doubts? I still have doubts, but certainly more optimistic than I was 5 hours ago. Let's put it that way.
I think Joe Milton showed a lot today because if you told me how I had to defend Joe Milton in Tennessee's offense, I would have done a soft zone, knowing he has accuracy issues, and tell hey, let him beat us underneath. If he completes those passes like he did tonight, then he can have that because in the past he hasn't shown he can do that. And like Oddspots just said, I don't think he'll be a Hendon Hooker, but I think in Tennessee's offense right now in this quarterback room, he's probably your best bet next year because I worry, a lot of people are high on Nico, but if you throw Nico out there next season, you're probably going to have a Klubnik performance like you did tonight where there's certain things that Joe Milton is not going to do that true freshman would because they just haven't been in the offense long enough. And Joe Milton's been around a lot of college football. So I feel like in that aspect, mentally, if he gets there, he has the arm to make the plays. It's just like tonight, we saw some things. It was just he was a little slower on his reads, and he would stare down the receiver off the snap. So if he wanted to throw to Squirrel White in the slot, he was staring him down the whole way. He never looked anywhere else. So that's another thing Hooker was really good at is he could look off the safeties and open up a Jalen Hyatt deep ball. So I feel like there's steps Joe Milton has to take if he wants to reach that Hendon Hooker-esque level where you can compete in the top of the SEC. But I feel like if you put him in the offense next year, he'll suffice. It's just a matter of does he make the jump from a 7-8 win quarterback to that 10-win, 11-win quarterback?
Odd Job says Joe is not Hendon, but I don't think there is anything better out there. I've already read this one. I'm sorry. I thought you had another one out there. You have Nico waiting. You do. I think we can all agree, no matter what you think of Joe Milton's performance tonight. I'll go back to you for just a second longer, Callie, and then I'll let you out of here. You got you're in the back of a moving car. I'm not going to let you do a good way to get yourself killed. I think we can all agree that we're talking about a B-plus situation at quarterback, right? At the very, very least. And if Joe shows absolutely no improvement in the next 6 months heading into the season, you're still at a B-plus level. I mean, I think do you get to an A level that Hendon Hooker was? I think that's what we're having the debate over, which is kind of minutia.
You have a very good problem on your hands. You have too many quarterbacks. So like if Joe doesn't make an improvement, you still have Taven Jackson in that quarterback room.
True.
He's been in the offense that a lot of people don't talk about. You have Nico, who can probably learn the offense over the summer, and he was on the sideline, and it looked like he was gelling pretty well with the other quarterbacks on the sideline. So I feel like you have good like you don't want to have one quarterback and then nobody else behind him, and you're talking about like if we were talking about Joe Milton as the end all be all, then that's a little different. But you have so many options that if Joe Milton doesn't get the job done, then somebody else can step up and do it. So I really do feel like he'll be all right.
It's interesting watching him play because the ability was there. I wrote on offthehooksports.com that he does throw flat-footed. I think that's something that could be addressed. Agility drills is what I would work with him at. He just seems a little heavy-footed, which we talk about more with offensive linemen than we typically do quarterbacks. But I think there's improvement there. I think he could go from being a C runner in the offseason with offseason work to a B runner, which would change things dramatically. Again, hit that thumbs up button. And I want to go back to the message board, but the thumbs up button really helps us. Odd spots, he did look off the safety on one TD. That's a great point. Defense will have to be better with Joe at quarterback. Agreed. Also, remember, Clemson has a good defensive line. That is very true. They had one linebacker and one defensive lineman opt out of the game that will probably go in the first half of the NFL draft of the first round. And so it wasn't as good as we've seen throughout the year, but it was still very, very good. One of the better ones that Tennessee faced. Maybe who would have been better? I would say Georgia was probably better up front that Tennessee faced than Clemson this year as far as just the defensive front. I would have said Alabama before the season with Will Anderson in that group, but the way Tennessee handled them, it's tough to say that. But yeah, I mean, this was a very good defensive front. And if this offense grows into more of an intermediate passing game and you still win 11 games, Caleb, I don't think anybody's going to care.
No, I mean, if you win 11 games and it's not as flashy as it was this year, I don't think anybody will complain. And I do think with Joe at quarterback, your defense will have to be better because, like, the Alabama game always comes to mind. Like, Hendon came out and was almost always in a deficit or fighting for that win, and he got it done. With Joe, I don't know if that'll happen as much because he's just not experienced in the position as well. So I also think if Joe is playing with a lead, a lot of tension is a lot of pressure is taken off of him because if your defense can get stops and you get to come out like, I don't know, you're playing Florida in September, October, and you stop Florida and then you come out after a 3 and out and you get to put up a touchdown, you can just keep doing that. Your job gets a lot easier. So I do agree that the defense has to get better. And that's really the only thing holding this team back right now is because I believe whoever you put at quarterback will suffice as long as your defense can get any stops.
David says if Joe is a B plus, then Hendon was an A plus. Joe can improve, and we can have a great team next year. No doubt about that. I want to hit on that. Who really stood out on defense for us? What a great unexpected year. Go Big Orange. Agree with all of that. Brandon says, thank you, Dave, and everyone at Off the Hook Sports. Especially want to mention Amanda LaFrada, who's fantastic, for being a big part of the awesome season. Great YouTube channel. I was just about to go to Caleb Calhoun, and I don't know, maybe pass under a bridge. But there he is. Caleb Jarreau, I want to thank you as well, and Caleb Calhoun. It's been a heck of a year. I'm ready to eat my black-eyed peas and ready for this year to be over. We always
black-eyed peas are disgusting. I don't eat them. I despise them.
You with the way my wife cooks them with ham, you would love them.
Wrong.
Come on over. Come down. Come see us because we're going to be happy all day on Sunday. But it's really the symbolism of this has been one heck of a year for us and me. And yeah, but I'll get you fake black-eyed peas and you can eat them on Sunday. All right, let's leave it at this. How many games does Tennessee win next year? It's never too early. Without looking at the schedule,
I'm going 9. I'm going 9. I'm not a big believer in them next year. lot of rebuilding that needs to be done. And I said, but I'm still on the
bowl game or without bowl game.
Oh, I'm going 8 in the regular season without the bowl game. I'm going 8. I said 9 with the bowl game. I'm going 8. But I'm all on the 2024 national championship train. Everybody join.
All right. Caleb, Gyro.
I'm saying 10 in the regular season because your SEC West opponent next year is Texas A&M, and we know what a train wreck that is. So that's a gimme. And you have to travel to Tuscaloosa, which will be tough, and you have to travel to Gainesville, which is always. I mean, Florida could be bad, but going to Gainesville is still a tough game, no matter what team they have. So I don't know. I'd say 10.
I put the over under at 9.5. I'm going to take 10 as the total, but I'm going to cheat and include the bowl game. Caleb, safe travels. Both of you guys have a very happy new year. I'm sure I'll talk to you tomorrow. We've got a ton of coverage on offthehooksports.com. We want you to check that out. We'll have a ton coming out tomorrow as well. Oh, another person I want to thank, Marlon McKinney. Who has been absolutely fantastic with Vol stuff. There's a lot of people to thank. This has been an insane year, and wait till we really get rolling here in a couple of weeks, about a month. We've got some big additions we're excited about, and we hope to continue with Cooper Mays and Jacob Warren. But Jacob Warren may have to work it in between his workouts with an NFL team. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. So have a very blessed weekend, everyone. Happy New Year. Thank you, Caleb's. I'm Dave Hooker. This is a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.